I know, Ali, you will not comment on policy, but what can communities, individuals and communities do about the whole matter?
You want to start?
Well, I suppose apart from practical help, which isn't for everybody, financial help, which isn't for everybody, you know, if you can spare whatever, some pounds, if you organise car boots, whatever, raise some funds, particularly in the run-up to Christmas. You know, there must be fetes that you go, fetes and tabletop sales that you can participate in. You can write to your MPs and complain about the situation. You can write to the European Union and complain about the situation. You can tell your children, you can go talk in schools. That's it, make it up as you go along, just get your voice to be heard.
And also, I mean, we can't forget that in Leicester alone there's already over 1,000 refugees, and supporting them and working with them and showing the local government, regional government, national government that they are supported and that we want them here and that we want them to integrate with us and we want to share our cultures with them and their cultures with us. So if you can get involved with local organisations like City of Sanctuary, like After 18, and any of the groups that work with the local groups and the local refugees here, please do. Just even being a voice and someone to talk to can mean so much to someone who has made it over here on their own and is still isolated because the system, once they get here, is also inadequate.
I think one thing I found very encouraging is that although the general political policy seems to be to keep people out, at a grassroots level in the UK, I think people individually are very welcoming. And I think all over the country there are big communities wanting to welcome refugees. And yeah, I mean, I was thinking teaching English, for instance, is something, a simple thing you can do. Go and have offer conversation classes. If you can speak the language, it's easier to integrate. So that's a very practical thing you can do. And speaking for my organisation, over 85% of the work we do is funded by private individuals. We don't get government sponsorship, government help at all. So we rely entirely on private funds for all the work we do around the world, especially now with the refugees.
I find it quite ironic, you know, there have been mass protests going on in London that, in my opinion, haven't received the media coverage that they should have done. But that shouldn't put you off. Just because something's not easy and just because it's not getting the attention you'd like it to shouldn't stop you. It should be a driving force for getting yourself out there and making an even bigger noise and making sure that people do hear you. You know, if you're passionate about it, just keep doing it, keep going out there, keep getting your views out and making yourself heard. And eventually, they will have to hear. Because the more you do it, the more other people will join in who feel the same.
Hi, yeah.
Hello.
After 18, which is the Leicester charity that supports unaccompanied children. And there are just 2 points I wanted to make, following on from what Sophie was saying. First point is that the Dublin Convention doesn't apply to minors in terms of returning them to the first country they were fingerprinted on in Europe. But that message is not getting through to minors who are making that journey, and they are very afraid of being sent back to other countries when they need to get to a certain destination. So I think the message should be that that doesn't apply to them. But having said that, what does apply to them is the issue of age assessment. So it's how they prove that they're a minor if they are going to avail themselves to support along the way. And I personally find it quite shocking that European developed countries like Italy and France are not properly safeguarding minors on that journey to the UK. One of our workers is actually on sabbatical in Italy at the moment, and you were mentioning the mafia and the way that the mafia was infiltrating some of the camps and the centres in Italy, and particularly around what's lucrative and what's not lucrative in terms of how people are categorised and age assessments and all those sort of things is certainly very concerning, and it's not good safeguarding practice for minors to be in centres with lots of particularly 10 to 12-year-old girls and centres with adults. So I just wanted to kind of raise that as an issue. But also, we've been working in the city for I've been working in the city for more than 5 years now, and some of our young people have actually been removed back to Afghanistan and are making that journey again for a second time. So we're seeing people coming back through Cali who've already made that journey once, now making it for a second time. So it's a complete revolving door. And I think we need to, when we talk to politicians, we need to be talking more about what the consequences are, what the overall cycle of migration is, and not just they're here, they should be here, we need to remove them, because that's not problem solved, that's just problem moved, and the problem comes back.
Absolutely.
So,
Yeah. Well, and I think of the journey that I think I touched on that they have made across Africa, and I think about Boatload of Eritreans singing, and I think what the journey is they've made across Africa, across Libya, across the Sahara Desert, just to get to the Mediterranean, and then do that frightening journey, and then arrive in Europe, and then be sent back again.
Yeah.
It's just inconceivable. Yeah. And as you said, there were a lot of minors, a lot of children, young people travelling on their own.
Yeah.
I wanted to come back to the point you said earlier, where somebody told you this person isn't Syrian, they're Kurdish. I'd like to know, if they're identifying this person as a Kurdish person, it would be interesting to ask them about what nationality of Kurds that they're talking about. Because if you're saying they're not they're Kurdish, well then they're somebody of no fixed country, are they?
Exactly.
So, which we were probably aware of anyway, but I thought that was very interesting. What is the response to something like that, and what does that say about the person saying that to you?
I don't know either. Maybe I should have gone into that in
no, that's not criticism of you.
Sure,
it's
but
just,
frankly, if you're in the camps and it's raining and you're just desperately searching for the next stack of firewood or the next stack of whatever, it's just, you get all kinds of input, and it's only when you come home that you process that input and think, oh well, how does that work then? I think also this documentary series, it's called Europe or Die, and it was made by Vice. It's I think it's 14 parts, and it's quite harrowing, some of it, but it's very enlightening in terms of this is Greece, this is Spain, this is Italy, this is the overall European asylum seekers experience, whatever. It's Europe or Die, and they also make this point in that documentary, so it wasn't just my experience.
And when you look at the policies that European countries have at the moment, particularly when you look at the border areas, in Hungary and that kind of region as well, and you look at who is being allowed across the borders, Syrians, Iraqis, Afghanistanis, there's almost becoming there seems to be a hierarchy of preference amongst the refugees. Just because you come from this area, you'll be waltzed in.
Yeah.
Whereas you might not be from an area that is currently undergoing an active, all-out war, but you might be in genuine fear for your life and risk persecution, and if you get sent back to your country, you will be killed. But that's not being heard at the moment, because there does appear to be preferential treatment by nationality, and in a place where people have lost their documents and lost, legitimately en route to everything they've got, it does make a difficult situation so much harder.
Certainly I didn't have that slide up for very long that showed you the percentage of the nationalities who were seeking asylum. Eritreans and Somalis are fairly high up there.
Sudanese.
And also Sudanese. And in any of those countries, they can't be sent back. They have Eritrea has a terrible human rights record with enforced military conscription and enforced labour while they're under conscription. It's just like slave labour for men and women. And Somalia is a total state of anarchy. So.
There seems to be a lot made of this losing documents, but if I was fleeing a burning house, how could I have a passport with me, And would you have a passport anyway? You're coming from a poor country,
And there was a point.
What are these documents people are talking about people should have,
There was a point in the Calais camp where it was overflowing so badly that people were setting up tents outside the designated area, and the French police actually came and bulldozed that section of the camp at 5 in the morning when people were still sleeping, and set the tents on fire. Were the tents
the tents were moved together into massive piles and then basically skipped and taken away, but that meant that any documents that were left in those tents were taken away with them. It's also compounded by the fact that if you've got from one place to another through people smugglers, quite often they'll lift your passport if you happen to have one. So they'll say, oh, as part of your deposit, give us your passport, and then they'll take your passport and they'll sell it on to another refugee.
Yeah, that's the story we heard. Practically nobody on the boats had passports.
It's in terms of victimisation, it's completely cyclical. You know, you're going to pay us to come on our boat, we're going to take your passport off you, we're going to get a few metres out to sea, and then we're going to hop into this dinghy and leave you to it. And take your documents with us.
And there's also, I should say, we haven't even touched on this, in southern Spain, in the province of Murcia, there's a massive agricultural area where most of Europe's tomatoes and cucumbers and aubergines, whatever, are grown in polytunnels. I'm sure you're familiar with all the produce of Spain packaging. There's actually a very large camp there of illegal immigrants, mostly Africans, who work there in just the most dire conditions of, you know, modern day slavery. It's nothing short of slavery. The company store, they can only get foodstuffs and things they need through their employer at inflated prices and all this kind of thing. So again, you know, what awaits them once they're actually in Europe is often no better than what they're fleeing from. It's a very sad situation.
Are there any lawyers groups which are covering that? Or is anybody?
There are some, certainly that we've encountered. We're working with one group that's working on this sub-clause of Dublin 3 that unaccompanied minors can, if they have a relative in the UK, can apply to join that relative. So there is a group of lawyers that we're certainly aware of that's working on it. The whole legal situation surrounding all of this is unbelievably complex and weaved, and you know, there's not a huge amount of law help at the moment. Although actually the biggest problem there is in the camps is getting any information that there is about the legal process out to the refugees. Because with such a variety of languages, there might be a lawyer out there who can do stuff, but there's not a translator who can speak Pashto in the area.
So we'd like an online resource in multiple languages.
But the problem is that the situation and the rules and the way you can go and can't go change so often that it needs to be updatable, and you need to be able to give them the most up-to-date information. If you tell a refugee that this border is currently accepting people from these places, 2 weeks later that might not be the case. And so all of a sudden, you're sending them on a wild goose chase. It's incredibly difficult. There are lawyers that are trying to help, you know, humanitarian lawyers, but they are working an uphill struggle at the moment.
Thank you very much for your contribution tonight, Alison, and thank you, Millie and Ali and Sophie. And I think we also ought to recognise Ambrose, who does fantastic work.
Yes.